The manila folder hit the vanity like a gavel, filled with secrets sharp enough to cut a life apart. Inside the bridal suite, Victoria Blackwood's ultimatum promised Emma one thing: walk away, or watch everything she loved be destroyed. Rainbow light fractured across the marble, like a promise already breaking. 200 guests held their breath inside St. Michael's Cathedral, flowers and candle smoke sweetening the air until it felt hard to breathe. Emma Collins stood in a pool of color at the very edge of forever, her ivory silk dress whispering at her ankles, her grandmother's pearl earrings cool against skin that felt suddenly too tight. James leaned in close enough that she could see the tremor in his throat and smell the mint he'd chewed to calm his nerves. "I can't do this," he whispered, and the words carried into the nave as if the building itself wanted the truth to be witnessed. The ripple was immediate. Programs folded in fists, a prayer half swallowed, a violinist's bow lowering to silence. Sound became a muted tide. Emma's fingers clenched around her bouquet of white peonies until stems snapped beneath her grip. For 2 years she had practiced this moment in gentle daydreams, her steady walk, his steady smile, the relief of finding a home in another heart. In real time, everything unraveled like a seam caught on a nail. 30 minutes earlier, it had begun with a knock that wasn't a knock. The bridal suite's door had opened and Victoria Blackwood entered as if she'd built the cathedral herself. Designer navy suit, silver hair sculpted to a blade, eyes that appraised, never softened. She moved through the room like cold air, placed a manila folder on the vanity, and smiled the way a queen smiles at a peasant who's tracked mud onto marble. "Emma dear, we need to talk." Emma had turned from the mirror, cheeks warm with the happiness she hadn't yet learned to hide. "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood. Is everything ready?" "That," Victoria said, tapping the folder, "depends entirely on you." Inside lay copies of a life, bank statements, employment verification, a lease agreement for the one bedroom in the arts district where the walls smelled faintly of old plaster and paint, a photograph of her 10-year-old Honda in the hospital parking lot, itemized student loans, $43,000 typed in the kind of font that pretended to be objective. Emma's pulse surged loud in her ears. She felt herself become both woman and case file. $43,000 in student loans, Victoria recited, voice smooth as lacquer. A modest rental. A dependable vehicle. How quaint. Tell me, Emma, do you truly imagine you are suitable for the Blackwood family? My work is good work, Emma had said, too fast. I'm a pediatric nurse at Children's Memorial. I help. How noble. A flick of the hand dismissing a lifetime. James has a future in politics. He needs a wife who can elevate him, not one whose working-class background will drag him down. The words landed like stones. Working class as if it were a crime scene, as if her father's years as a firefighter and her mother's hours sorting papers at a school office were stains rather than service. As if the scholarship Emma earned by studying through exhaustion meant nothing unless it hung from the right name. Victoria slid a check across the vanity with the same tenderness someone might push away a soiled napkin. $50,000. Enough to square the loans and start fresh. All you have to do is walk away. Tell James you realized you're not compatible. Save us all the embarrassment of a doomed marriage. You want me to leave him at the altar? Emma asked, and even in the moment her voice sounded to her like a stranger's, calm in the way of someone balancing on the edge of a roof. I want you to be realistic about your place in the world. The smile sharpened. If you refuse, you may discover how fragile medical careers can be. Recommendations can be withdrawn. Supervisors can be encouraged to question judgment. It would be unfortunate if your dedication to children were overshadowed by doubt. The room had narrowed then, air thinning as if siphoned out. Emma had imagined ripping the check, shattering the practiced composure on Victoria's face with the force of her conviction. Instead, she set the check back on the folder, lined edges to edges. I love your son, she said. James will thank you for this someday. Victoria reached for the envelope, slid it back into her purse. We all will. Now, at the altar, Emma understood Victoria hadn't come to negotiate. She had come to set a fuse. James didn't look at her. He looked at the floor, at the stain in the marble veining, anywhere but the woman he'd asked to trust him. I'm sorry, he said, but it sounded like relief dressed as regret. A priest cleared his throat and closed the book. Someone in the third row whispered, "Oh God," and it wasn't a prayer. Emma's hands moved on instinct. She lowered the bouquet onto the steps as if returning an offering. The silence became a compass. North was forward and humiliation could only follow behind if she kept moving. She turned to face the congregation. 200 faces arranged in polite horror, mouths tucked into sympathetic shapes, eyes bright with the electricity of gossip. In the front row, Victoria sat with posture that could slice glass, a small, satisfied breath barely lifting her pearl necklace. "The wedding is canceled," Emma said. Her voice surprised her, steady, unadorned. She gathered her train and began the long walk down the aisle alone, heels ticking against marble like a metronome counting the beats of a life abruptly switching songs. Acha! Ild reached for her mother's hand. A bridesmaid stifled a sob. The doors opened on their brass hinges with a weighty exhale, and then the city's autumn rain stepped inside to claim her. Outside, the sky was the color of old tin, rain falling with the single-mindedness of truth. Within seconds, her hair unpinned itself into damp curls, the silk darkening in patches that crawled upward like tide water. She stood on the stone steps and let the cold bite through to her bones because there was an honesty in it that the cathedral hadn't allowed. The veil clung to her cheek. Mascara burned into the corners of her eyes and she blinked, tasting salt and sky. Her phone buzzed with Jessica's name, maid of honor, emergency kit ninja, friend who would burn empires for her. "Come with me," Jess pleaded, appearing at her side beneath an umbrella held like a shield. "We'll go to my place. We'll eat terrible cakes straight from the box." Emma shook her head. She could feel the panic wanting to sprint. "Where will you sleep? How will you work when the references go dark? Why did he let you stand there alone?" But another impulse rose, quieter and more stubborn. "Breathe." "I just need a minute," she said, and Jessica, a good friend who understood the currency of dignity, squeezed her hand and retreated with promises to call, to come back, to fight. The rain intensified until the street mirrored the cathedral's spires in blurred watercolor. Taxis hissed past, all occupied, yellow smudges in a city suddenly disinterested in chivalry. Emma's lease had ended last week. Her furniture sat in James's penthouse awaiting a future being dismantled in real time. Children's Memorial had gone quiet on her applications the last 2 days, emails floating without anchors. She could see the path Victoria had laid out, narrow, punishing, lined with closed doors. A car slowed at the curb, sleek and dark, windows fogged from warmth within. The driver's side lowered halfway, and a man's voice lifted over the rain, courteous, concerned, edged with the kind of steadiness people develop after storms. "Are you all right?" Emma almost laughed. The cathedral glowed behind her like a ship she'd been shoved from. She pressed her lips together, swallowed the laugh before it turned to a sob, and stepped back from the street as if distance could turn the question small enough to hold. For a heartbeat, she considered walking, anywhere, nowhere. Then the light shifted, a car door opened, and the stranger stepped out into the rain, shrugging off his jacket as if cold were an afterthought and kindness a reflex. "Please," he said, closer now, eyes dark and clear. "Let me help you get somewhere dry." She should say no. She should refuse any lifeline tied to someone else's mercy. She should be smarter than a drenched fairy tale. But the cathedral's doors boomed shut behind her like the end of a chapter, and the rain kept falling as if it knew she needed clean slates. Emma lifted her chin, felt the pearls cold against her skin, and realized that whatever came next would be hers to answer for. She was wet. She was frightened. Her life had been rearranged without her consent. And yet a strange thing, beneath the ache, something stubborn and bright flickered, like a match cupped in both hands. "I don't know where I'm going," she said, and the truth of it tasted like iron and relief. "That's all right," the man replied, offering the jacket. "Sometimes the best journeys start that way." Behind them, somewhere deep in the bowels of the cathedral, rumors began to flower. Ahead, the city blurred into motion, rain stippling the pavement into 1,000 possible roads. Emma took the jacket, she took a breath, and then she stepped off the stone into a future too. Hat, for the first time all day, didn't belong to anyone but her. The rain had not stopped. It fell in relentless sheets that washed the city's edges into watercolor, as if the world itself were being redrawn. Emma sat in the back seat of the stranger's car, the silk of her ruined dress clinging cold against her skin, her bouquet abandoned somewhere on the cathedral steps like a gravestone for a life already gone. The stranger drove with quiet focus, dark hair damp from the storm, his profile lit by the shifting glow of traffic lights. He had introduced himself only once, in a tone both gentle and assured. Alexander, nothing more, nothing less. The hum of the engine should have been calming, but Emma's heart thudded like a trapped bird. Every nerve screamed at her to question her choices. Who was this man? Why had he stopped for her? And why, after everything that had been taken from her in a single day, did she feel safer here than she had in her fiancé's penthouse for months? Alexander didn't press her with questions. He simply adjusted the heat, handed her tissues when silent tears streaked down her face, and drove. The silence between them was not heavy. It was strangely respectful, as though he understood she was balancing on a knife's edge and words might push her into the fall. At last, her voice broke through the hum. "I'm a pediatric nurse," she said abruptly, as though confessing something. Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. "I don't have money, or connections, or the kind of pedigree James's family thought I needed. But I saved children's lives. That has to count for something." Alexander glanced at her then, his dark eyes steady, not pitying but piercing. "It counts for everything," he said simply. The words hit harder than Victoria's insults, harder than James's cowardice. They landed in the hollow places, filling them with something sharp and unexpected. Dignity. Emma pressed the tissue to her face, fighting back a sob, because this stranger with rain in his hair was offering her more kindness in minutes than she had been given in years. When they reached the modest hotel downtown, Alexander cut the engine and turned toward her. "I don't want to intrude," he said, "but I have a daughter. She's 8. She's been through a lot. She needs someone who understands children, someone who doesn't scare easily. You remind me of the kind of person she could trust." Emma blinked at him, stunned. Her life had been stripped bare hours earlier, and now this man was offering her something so surreal it felt like a trick of the storm. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Alexander replied. "You put children first. You walked away from something that wasn't right, even though it broke you in half. And you trusted a stranger long enough to get warm. That's more than most people could manage." He pulled a card from his wallet and set it in her hand. "Alexander Sterling, CEO, Sterling Technologies." Emma's breath caught. She had heard of Sterling Technologies. Everyone had. This wasn't just a stranger in the rain. This was a man who could buy and sell the Blackwoods twice over, a man whose name carried weight in boardrooms and politics, and yet here he was, offering her not diamonds or pity but a job, an invitation into the heart of his home. "I don't expect an answer tonight," he said, "but consider it. Housing is included, and more importantly, so is the chance to matter to someone who needs you." Emma stared at the embossed letters on the card until they blurred. She had nowhere to sleep, no job leads, and the looming shadow of Victoria Blackwood poisoning her name in medical circles. The offer felt like salvation disguised as madness. "I'll think about it," she whispered. "That's all I ask." As she stepped into the hotel lobby, still roaring, kept in his jacket, Alexander watched her disappear through the glass doors. Something flickered in his gaze, recognition, grief, and a strange, cautious hope. Alone in the driver's seat, he thought of Sophia, his late wife, and the way she had believed the world could be healed one act of compassion at a time. His daughter, Olivia, was slipping deeper into silence every day. Perhaps, just perhaps, this drenched woman with eyes too brave for her heartbreak might be the one to bring back the light. Back in her room, Emma sat on the edge of the bed, Sterling's card on the nightstand. The city lights blurred through rain-streaked windows. She had lost everything she thought defined her, yet here she was, standing on the brink of something unknown. Victoria Blackwood had promised to crush her life to dust. Emma's trembling fingers brushed the card. Maybe fate had given her a weapon in return. Tomorrow, she decided, she would call. And tomorrow, she would find out if this strange twist of fortune was her salvation, or the beginning of an even more dangerous game. The Sterling estate did not look like the fortress Emma had imagined. She expected cold steel gates and marble floors that smelled faintly of polish and money. Instead, she found herself standing at the threshold of a home that was grand, yes, but softened with gardens, bookshelves visible through tall windows, and the comforting scent of something baking inside. It was beautiful, in the way of a place that had been lived in, not just photographed for magazines, and yet, every step toward the front door made her pulse quicken. Alexander greeted her in dark jeans and a button-down shirt, nothing like the intimidating billionaire she'd built up in her mind. He smiled warmly, but Emma caught a shadow behind it, the kind of shadow left by grief that lingers even when daylight returns. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "Olivia's excited to meet you, though she'll do her best to hide it." Emma smoothed her dress nervously, as if the 8-year-old waiting beyond the hall were a queen who could sentence her with a glance. The thought made her laugh inside, but the weight of the moment pressed down harder. She was about to be judged, not by a mother-in-law with cruel eyes, but by a little girl who had lost more than Emma could fathom. And then Olivia appeared. She stepped into the kitchen doorway with deliberate grace, her dark hair framing a face that looked too solemn for someone her age. Her eyes, those same piercing eyes as her father, studied Emma with unnerving precision. She did not smile. She did not look shy. She looked like someone who had learned to keep her heart guarded at all costs. "You're the lady from the wedding," Olivia said, her tone more observation than accusation. Emma's breath caught. "How did you know about that?" "Dad told me," Olivia replied, crossing her arms. "He said you were having the worst day of your life because someone was mean to you. Was that true?" The bluntness of the question staggered Emma. She had expected polite silence, not interrogation. For a heartbeat, she considered softening the truth, hiding the jagged edges. But something about the child's gaze, sharp, honest, unflinching, made lies impossible. "Yes," Emma said finally. "It was true. I was very sad. But I'm hopeful too. Hopeful that better days might come." Olivia tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Mom used to say sad feelings were important. That they told you when, so anything wasn't right. Do you believe that?" Emma swallowed hard. The mention of Olivia's mother had shifted the air, heavy with ghosts. "I do believe that," she said gently. "I think sadness reminds us of what matters most, and it helps us notice when something better finally comes along." The little girl studied her a long moment, then climbed onto a chair at the kitchen table, legs swinging with calculated nonchalance. "Are you a good person?" The question landed like a stone in still water, rippling through Emma's chest. Every insult Victoria had spat, every rejection email from the hospital, every whispered rumor of her not being good enough, all of it echoed now. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears as she met Olivia's gaze. "I try to be," Emma answered, voice quiet but steady. "I help children when they're sick or scared. Sometimes I give medicine. Sometimes I just sit with them until they feel brave again. Being a good person. It means trying, even when it's hard." Olivia didn't blink. Then finally she nodded once, as if Emma had passed the first test. "That's what Mom said too." Alexander, who had been silent by the counter, exhaled as though he had been holding his breath. For the first time, Emma saw relief soften his features, saw a man who desperately wanted his daughter to trust again. Over dinner, Olivia bombarded Emma with questions. Not the silly kind, but sharp, probing ones about hospitals, about children who fought scary illnesses, about whether Emma had ever been afraid. Emma answered each one honestly, never sugarcoating, but never surrendering to despair either. She told Olivia stories of courage, of small victories, of laughter in hospital rooms where no one thought laughter possible. By dessert, Olivia had edged her chair closer. By the time the plates were cleared, she was leaning into Emma's side, asking if she'd like to see her room. Alexander caught Emma's eye then, gratitude shining unspoken. But when Olivia skipped ahead toward the staircase, her voice floated back, deceptively casual. "You should know. The other nannies all failed. They smiled too much. They pretended too hard. I always knew." She stopped, looking over her shoulder, eyes gleaming with a challenge. "We'll see if you're different." Emma's pulse quickened. It wasn't hostility, it was a warning. She wasn't just being interviewed. She was being tested by a child who had endured too much loss to risk trusting the wrong person again. As Emma followed Olivia upstairs, her heart pounded with equal parts fear and hope. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about proving to a grieving little girl and to herself that she could be more than her failures, more than the humiliation she had endured. That she could be the kind of good person Olivia's mother once believed in. And in the silence of the hallway lined with family photographs, Emma realized, passing this test would decide not just her future, but perhaps all of theirs. The days that followed blurred into something Emma hadn't felt in months, purpose. Yet beneath every tender moment with Olivia, beneath every quiet smile from Alexander, there was a current of suspense running just out of sight, like a storm building beyond the horizon. By Saturday morning, the Science Museum trip became their first real family outing. Olivia skipped ahead between the glass exhibits of jellyfish and skeletons, pointing out facts that sounded like they belonged in college lectures rather than the mouth of an 8-year-old. Alexander watched from a careful distance, his expression softening each time Emma knelt to listen intently, never mocking, and never dismissing. He saw something flicker in Olivia's eyes, trust, cautious, but growing. Yet Emma noticed the shadows too. Olivia's laughter always stopped abruptly, as if she remembered it wasn't supposed to last, and Alexander, though warm, carried silence with him like a second skin. It was in the way his hand lingered over his phone when he thought no one noticed, in the way he looked at photographs of his late wife on the hallway table. He was a man pulled between past and present, hope and grief. That evening, after Olivia had gone to bed, Emma stepped out of the guest cottage to breathe in the night air. The gardens shimmered under the glow of lanterns, their fragrance wrapping around her like a lullaby. But peace was fragile. On her phone, a new message appeared, anonymous, unsigned. "You don't belong there. Walk away before you're crushed." Her chest tightened. There was only one person cruel enough to send such a warning: Victoria Blackwood. Emma deleted the message, but the unease remained. Victoria's reach was long. If she could poison hospital boards, she could poison Alexander's opinion just as easily. Emma promised herself she would never let the woman win, not this time. Still, fear gnawed at her resolve. The next day, Olivia tested her in earnest. "Other nannies," she announced at breakfast, "never lasted because they lied. They pretended to care about me, but really, they only cared about what they could get from Dad. Money, connections, things." Emma met her steady gaze, heart pounding. "And what do you think I want?" Olivia studied her with unnerving intensity. "I don't know yet, but if you're fake, I'll know. I always know." Alexander, seated across the table, froze at his daughter's bluntness. Emma glanced at him, waiting for him to scold Olivia for her sharp words, but instead he remained silent, his eyes fixed on Emma's face, as though her response mattered to him just as much as to Olivia. "I want," Emma said slowly, "to be someone you can count on. Someone who sees you, not your father's money or your family's name, just you." Olivia didn't respond right away, but later Emma found the girl waiting outside her cottage with a stack of storybooks. "Can you read to me?" she asked. It wasn't surrender, it was an invitation, a sliver of trust. Night by night, Emma became woven into the rhythms of their lives. Homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories, shared laughter over burnt cookies. Alexander began lingering in doorways just to watch, something unspoken tightening in his chest. Each time he saw Olivia lean into Emma's side, each time Emma's laughter filled spaces that had been hollow since Sophia's death. But shadows were never far. One evening, while helping Olivia prepare for a school project, Emma overheard Alexander on the phone in his study. His voice, usually calm, was sharp with controlled fury. "If Victoria Blackwood thinks she can threaten my household, she's underestimated me. This is my family now. She will not dictate who belongs here." Emma froze in the hallway, breath caught. He knew Victoria was meddling again. The knowledge was both relief and terror. Relief that she wasn't alone in the fight. Terror that this battle could cost them everything. Later, when their eyes met across the dining room, the air seemed to crackle with unspoken words. Emma saw the weight in Alexander's shoulders, the conflict between protecting his daughter, honoring his late wife, and opening his heart to someone new. That night, Olivia's small voice cut through the quiet. "Dad," she said, sliding into the study where he sat alone. "Don't be sad. Emma makes us feel like home again. Mom would have liked her." Alexander's throat tightened. He pulled his daughter close, but his eyes lifted toward the window where the guest cottage light glowed faintly. His heart, once locked away, was stirring back to life, and with it came the risk of losing everything if he chose wrong. For Emma, the days ahead promised more than just healing. They promised confrontation. Because Victoria Blackwood wasn't finished, she had set her sights on something far bigger than ruining a nurse's career. She was coming for the Sterling family itself. And Emma knew, with a shiver of dread, that the storm outside the cathedral had only been the beginning. The storm came quietly, not with thunder, but with whispers. It started with a headline. Emma was standing at the nurse's station in the children's ward, finally back to part-time shifts she had managed to secure despite Victoria's poison, when the screen above the waiting room flickered to a news segment. Sterling Technologies CEO, rumored to be linked with former bride, left at the altar. Her photo filled the screen, hair pulled back, pearl earrings gleaming, caught mid-blink outside the cathedral. The anchor's voice oozed with fascination. Sources close to the Blackwood family claim Miss Collins has a history of instability, financial desperation, and manipulative behavior. Is she targeting one of the wealthiest men in the city for security after her very public humiliation? The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. She barely registered the nurse beside her whispering, "Emma, isn't that?" Her throat went dry. Victoria. This was her hand, sharp, precise, aimed to bleed her of credibility before she could even defend herself. That night, Alexander stormed into the kitchen, phone still in his hand. His jaw was set, his eyes darker than Emma had ever seen. Olivia peeked out from behind him, worry etched across her young face. "It's Victoria," Alexander said flatly. "She planted the story. She's calling donors, allies, even my board of directors, painting you as some schemer who latched onto me out of desperation." His voice cracked with disgust. She's trying to destroy you, Emma, to make sure Olivia and I never get to know you. Emma's hands shook as she set down the dish towel. And it's working, she whispered. People will believe her. She has power. Don't. Alexander's voice was sharp enough to cut the air. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming in its intensity. You are not just anything. You are the woman who made my daughter laugh again, who walked into a nightmare and still found a way to be kind. Victoria sees that power in you and it terrifies her. Olivia came fully into the room then, clutching a worn photograph of her mother. Her voice trembled, but it carried. Dad, don't let her win. Mom always said good people scare bad ones. That's why they attack. The silence that followed was thick with truth. Emma blinked back tears, but Alexander's gaze did not waver. The next blow came harder. Anonymous packages began arriving at the estate. One contained doctored photos of Emma with a man she'd never met, posed to look intimate. Another, a forged hospital complaint alleging negligence. Each one designed to unravel her reputation thread by thread. One evening, after Olivia had gone to bed, Emma found Alexander in his study, surrounded by the opened packages. His tie hung loose, his hand clenched around a glass he hadn't touched. She thinks she can scare us into breaking, he murmured, almost to himself, then louder. Emma, I won't lie to you. This will get uglier before it gets better. Victoria knows exactly where to strike. Emma felt the weight of his words settle into her bones. For the first time she considered leaving, not because she wanted to, but because staying might shatter the fragile healing Olivia had begun. Maybe she's right, Emma whispered. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I should go before it destroys everything you've built. Alexander's head snapped up, fury igniting in his eyes. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, catching her wrist before she could retreat. His voice was low, raw, stripped of the careful reserve he usually carried. Don't you dare think for 1 second that you are the problem. She is, and I won't lose you because of her lies. The world seemed to narrow to the space between them, the storm outside the windows, the fire inside the room. Emma's breath caught, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and something far more dangerous, longing. For months, she had built walls of professionalism, insisted she was there only for Olivia. But the way Alexander was looking at her now, with desperation and reverence tangled together, shattered those walls. I can't let Olivia lose another woman she trusts, Emma said softly, her voice shaking. You won't, Alexander answered, almost a vow, because I won't let Victoria or anyone take you from us. For the first time, he touched her face, fingers trembling as though he wasn't sure if he had the right. Emma closed her eyes, leaning into the warmth, her heart betraying every rule she had set for herself. The moment burned between them until Olivia's voice drifted down the hall, calling for her father. Alexander pulled back, torn between duty and desire, the conflict written all over his face. Emma turned away quickly, her hands pressed to her chest as if to contain the storm inside her. She had survived humiliation, rejection, and exile. But what terrified her now wasn't Victoria Blackwood. It was how much she wanted this family, how much she wanted him, and how much she stood to lose if the war with Victoria consumed them all. That night, as the estate settled into uneasy silence, a new package arrived at the gate. This one marked not with lies, but with a single phrase scrawled across the envelope in elegant handwriting. You cannot win. Emma stared at it under the porch light, the words burning into her mind. She knew then that the final battle with Victoria was coming, and this time, it would not be fought with whispers. It would be war. The envelope sat between them like a venomous snake. Its 3 words, you cannot win, were a declaration, a dare, a final warning from Victoria Blackwood. Emma's hands trembled as she held it beneath the porch light, but when Alexander took it from her, his expression hardened into something she had never seen before. He had always carried grief in his eyes, quiet shadows of Sophia, but now there was fire. The patient, cautious man who had offered her a jacket in the rain was gone. In his place stood a father, a protector, a man who had decided that the war Victoria wanted would end on his terms. She thinks she owns the battlefield, Alexander murmured, almost to himself. But she's forgotten. She doesn't set the rules here. I do. The next morning, Emma awoke to the sound of raised voices downstairs. She hurried into the hall just in time to see Victoria herself standing in the sterling foyer, impeccable in navy silk, her cold eyes glittering like blades. She hadn't come alone. 2 lawyers flanked her like soldiers. You're making a mistake, Alexander, Victoria said coolly, as though she were discussing a business deal rather than a family's destruction. This woman will ruin you. She already has. My contacts tell me the board is questioning your judgment. Donors are nervous. Politicians are whispering. You are a man with a daughter, with a company. Your legacy cannot afford scandal. Alexander stood tall, his presence filling the room. My legacy is my daughter, Victoria, and I'll be damned if I let you dictate the terms of her happiness. Victoria's smile was a knife. You sound just like your father, romantic, foolish, willing to throw away everything we built. Do you really think this nurse belongs here? In this house? In your life? Her gaze flicked toward Emma, dripping with disdain. She's a liability, and liabilities are meant to be cut loose. Emma's pulse raced, but before she could speak, Alexander stepped forward, voice low and cutting. You've been busy, Mother, planting lies, forging documents, manipulating the press. But here's the difference between us. I don't play in shadows. I fight in the light. He snapped his fingers and another man entered, Sterling Technologies' head of legal affairs, carrying a thick folder. He set it on the table with deliberate weight. We've documented everything, Alexander continued, his voice rising with controlled fury. Every false complaint you filed against Emma, every doctored photo, every call you made to poison her name in hospitals and politics, it's all here. Signed affidavits, traced accounts, hard proof. For the first time, Victoria's composure cracked. Her lawyer shifted uneasily. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. Oh, I would. Alexander's voice cut like steel. You see, you miscalculated. You thought Emma was weak, that you could break her spirit like glass, but she is stronger than you'll ever understand. And while you wasted your energy trying to destroy her, I was building a case strong enough to destroy you. The silence that followed was suffocating. Emma's breath caught as Alexander turned to her, his eyes burning not with anger now, but with something fierce and undeniable. Emma, I won't pretend anymore. I love you. I've loved you since the moment you stood in the rain and chose dignity over despair. You've brought light back into this house, into my life, into Olivia's heart, and I will not let anyone, especially my mother, take that away from us. Emma's knees nearly gave out. Her whole body trembled with the force of his words, with the truth she had tried so hard to bury. She had sworn she wasn't ready, sworn she wouldn't cross the line from caretaker to something more. But as Olivia appeared on the stairs, clutching the banister with wide, hopeful eyes, Emma knew there was no more hiding. I love you too, she whispered, voice breaking with emotion. I've tried to fight it, but I can't. Not anymore. You and Olivia. You are my family. You're everything. Olivia clapped her hands together, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. I knew it. I knew you loved each other. Victoria's fury twisted her features, but Alexander's lawyer placed the file into her hands like a verdict. You can walk away quietly, Victoria, he said, or this evidence goes to the press, to the authorities, to every boardroom you ever hope to control. For a long, taut moment, the woman who had orchestrated Emma's humiliation stood motionless, her empire teetering. Then, with a hiss of breath, she turned sharply on her heel and stalked out, her lawyer scrambling. JG behind her. The door slammed, and with it, years of poison began to dissipate. The house exhaled. Alexander crossed the room and pulled Emma into his arms, holding her as though letting go was no longer an option. Olivia wrapped her small arms around them both, their trio forming something unbreakable at last. Outside, the storm clouds broke, spilling golden sunlight across the gardens. For the first time since that terrible day in the cathedral, Emma felt no fear, no shame, no doubt. She had been stripped bare, tested, and nearly destroyed, but from the ruins, she had found something greater than she had ever dared dream, love that was fierce, chosen, and unstoppable. And as Alexander kissed her beneath the fading storm, Emma realized the cruel truth of Victoria's warning. It wasn't that she couldn't win, it was that she already had,